All right, you're taking a live look at the Hill Nation Summit in Washington, D.C., where we're speaking all day long with major players in our government, including business and policy. We've already heard from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and Michigan Republican Congressman John James, a 2026 gubernatorial candidate as well, along with several others. Coming up soon, we're going to hear from former DNC Vice Chair and gun control activist David Hogg. Before that, I want to welcome in Republican strategist Matt Klink, as well as News Nation political contributor and Democratic strategist Kurt Bardella for our political panel today. Thank you so much for being here on this busy day in Washington, D.C. for us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Kurt, let's start with you. News Nation's Blake Berman spoke with Kristi Noem earlier today, asking her about the biggest security threats facing the United States. Let's take a listen. We'll get your interpretation on the other side, specifically about sleeper cells.
If people are here in this country illegally, I go home. I mean, the law is the law, and we are upholding the law. And the president is very clear that he doesn't believe that the law should apply to some people and not to others, and that there should be consequences for some people and not for others.
So there she is talking about immigration. She also touched on threats to national's electrical grid, which she said is not being handled well, including by the Biden administration formally. What was your biggest takeaway from Secretary Noem's interview?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when Blake pressed her about prioritizing deportations. Are you really focusing on the violent criminals, on the people with the records? Kind of the promise that Donald Trump and his administration made when they came into office, that those were the very first deportations we would see. Instead, we've been seeing just get as many as you can wherever you can, round them up off the street, and we don't really know much information about their actual backgrounds, histories. Are these the violent, dangerous criminals, the MS-13 gang members? Because that was the expectation that was set. Not going after the agriculture workers, not going after the hotel workers, not going after the people who are doing the jobs that, frankly, most Americans don't want to do. And I thought Blake did an excellent job trying to get her to focus on that and really hold the administration accountable for the expectation they originally set.
Yeah, both our News Nation political reporters as well as our Hill partners doing their best to push back when we have some of these important lawmakers on the stand for us. Matt, let's talk a little bit about the big topic today, Fed Chair Jerome Powell. We got to hear from Peter Navarro. That's the White House Senior Counsel on Trade and Manufacturing. He didn't hold back at all when talking about the chair. Let's hear a piece of that.
What Powell has done incredibly and historically is he's the worst Fed chair, I think, in history. In Biden's time, you were there.
Yep.
He never said anything about the irresponsible fiscal bills. He just accommodated that.
Okay.
And he raised rates way too early and unleashed the inflation. And now today he's making the same mistake.
Okay.
So this is not a guy who understands economics.
Matt, some really important Republican lawmakers really firing at Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Even President Trump just moments ago from the White House saying he has no intention to fire him. And I'm wondering, when I hear these conversations, if there's nuance that we should be interpreting between being pushed out versus being firing. President Trump saying, I'm not going to fire him, but whether or not it might be possible to just get him released at some point or pushed out of office. What's your interpretation on how this might unfold?
Yeah, I think that the Donald Trump approach to Jerome Powell is that the beatings will continue until behavior changes. Look, they're clearly unhappy with the chairman of the Federal Reserve. They're not happy with the fact that he has not reduced interest rates. Donald Trump is a developer. He always wants lower rates. That's just an obvious statement for someone who has built things. He wants money to cost less to borrow. And right now, Jay Powell is standing in the way of a housing recovery because America's interest rates are high. That being said, the president has acknowledged that he has no plans to get rid of him, but he is certainly going to beat him up pretty good in public and use surrogates to do so. And look, if Jay Powell can't handle the heat, he could always resign. His term's coming up in, 6 or 8 months?
Right.
He could leave early and stop the pain.
Kurt, I want to talk a little bit about Tom Dempsey's reporting here just a minute ago. New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. He seemed to have made a lot of positive impressions with Democratic lawmakers this morning. We know about that breakfast meeting as well as New York business leaders yesterday. What does he need to do to get those remaining holdouts on his side? And then what I'm really curious about is whether or not trying to impress these people and get them to endorse him is got to do with his race for the mayoral candidacy this fall, or whether or not his eyes are already looking towards the future, if this is all about higher office.
Well, I think it's interesting because you have this dynamic right now where people on the right are elevating him as some sort of boogeyman, as someone you should be afraid of, a socialist, as Donald Trump proclaimed earlier today. And I think that when you meet the guy and talk to him in a more intimate setting, he's not that scary. And I think that these expectations that are being set and these boogeymen that are being erected around him make him actually look more reasonable in person. You go in there thinking, oh, this guy's going to be crazy. This guy's going to be so far to the left. I can't possibly imagine him as mayor. And if he's not that kind of a caricature, it actually plays much better for him in the room and could likely help him get more support.
Matt, I can't let you go until I talk about one of the hottest topics for the last week, of course, the Epstein files. Just a short time ago, President Trump addressed a question about that ongoing uproar over his administration's handling of it. Take a listen to this.
It's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes.
Now, that ending of what he just said there from the Oval Office is what caught my attention about the idea that Republicans got duped by either the Democrats or what President Trump calls the fake news. What's your read on this situation? How big of a deal is it if there are lawmakers on the MAGA side that are falling away from the president and therefore the president loses faith in them altogether?
Well, the Republicans keep giving the story oxygen. I think largely that many of the Republican leadership in the Trump administration, they use the allegation of this list to their political advantage, and then when they now held the reins of power, they're like, all right, let's see the list. And they're like, well, wait, there really isn't a list. And it's a huge letdown for a lot of the MAGA core group that believed that there was a list. And then, of course, that ignites all the conspiracy theorists who say, oh, it's being hidden because there must be some really powerful names on it. I mean, look, ultimately, Pam Bondi raised expectations on this thing. I think she kind of left Kash Patel and Dan Bongino hung out to dry. She should just put this thing to bed by doing one press conference and answering as many questions as possible, and then stop talking about it and move on. But this drib, drab, drib, it's going to keep going for at least another week if more people keep talking about it with no specifics being discussed.
Okay, our big thanks to our political panel, Kurt Bardella and Matt Klink, for your analysis on the Hill Nation Summit. We appreciate you both.
Thanks a lot.